Hi, and welcome to my channel. I have finished my first J.D. Robb book. If you were not here for the last TBR video that I did, I talked about a J.D. Robb challenge. I have printed out a chronological list of every book from the In Death series. And my plan is to read one book a week. Starting every Sunday, I will start the next book. And hopefully I finish it before the next Sunday. I mean, so far, we're good. I have read one and I finished it before the week was out. And now I'll start the next one on Sunday. So let's talk about book number 1, Naked in Death. Okay, first of all, this book was published in 1995. That is the year that I graduated from high school. So number one, I'm old, and that was a long time ago. I was so surprised by this book. So it's set in the future, and there are little hints that we get along the way that it's set in the future, but maybe some of those things will come into play later on. But there's just like certain kind of guns that they use and other technologies that they have, interactive kind of things. But what's funny is in 1995, the things that she thought was going to be happening in the like 2050s, every time I switch something on my computer, my camera stops recording. Anyway, this book takes place in 2058 in New York City, and we have a detective whose name is Eve Dallas. Here's what you need to know. You need to know what the trigger warnings are for this book. It was unexpected. There were some really unexpected things that I did not know was going to happen. Now, this book is, I would say, predominantly a thriller, mystery thriller, but it has some heavy romance in it. Now, the reason that I wouldn't qualify it necessarily as a romance is because this is a continuing story of Eve Dallas over like years. I mean, the last book I have on my list came out in 2020, and I know there's already been 2 books that came out in 2021 because I think she puts out 2 books in the In Death series every year. So, I mean, we're at almost 60 books right now. And so a traditional romance, if you extend out the relationship, maybe it'll be a trilogy. But for the most part, in a traditional romance, you have you have 2 people, generally, sometimes more than that. And at the end of the novel, they have come together and formed some kind of relationship. And there's a happily ever after. That's what makes it a romance. This is not necessarily like that. I mean, there is somebody that she has connected with, and so we do see elements of that romance in there, but I think the bigger picture is the mystery thriller of it. And so in this book, you can register as a sex worker in the future in 2058. And so that is what our victims have in common. And so now we think we have a serial killer who are killing the prostitutes who have registered themselves, and that's what they do for their job. And so it's just Eve not just trying to solve these murders, but also dealing with the fact that she likes one of the suspects, and also dealing with the fact that there are things in her past that she doesn't remember, and as she works through this case, they're coming back up to her, and that's where I was talking about, like, there are some super trigger warnings that you just need to know before you go into this book. So, especially if you have any kind of sexual assault background or anything like that, because I told you the victims are all sex workers. And so just know that the crimes are going to be sexual in nature. But I already love Eve. After the very first book, I already like that character, and I cannot wait to see what happens and where we go as we continue along. I love that I'm reading one of these every week, and so it just feels like I'm never going to have to be like, well, I'll get there in 6 months to the next book or whatever. Like, I know it's coming up. I just have to wait till Sunday. So I think what I'm going to do, since I'm reading 4 or 5 of these a month, and I'm planning to update every month, is I think I'm just going to do 4 books in each video. So I'll talk about each of the 4 books, and then that video will go up. And so sometimes I'll be a little bit ahead, a little bit further ahead, and sometimes I probably won't be very far ahead at all. But that's my plan, to keep things going. I did start in November because I want to finish by December of next year. Like at the end of next year, I want to be all caught up with the In-Depth series. And since we're almost up to 60 books, I needed a few extra weeks. So I'm starting this now in 2021 so that it'll be finished at the end of 2022. So if you want to join me on this JD Robb readathon, that's what I'm doing. I am reading 1 book a week. Now, I will say the first book, the Naked in Death book, I started on November the 7th. And so you can go from there and kind of see what my plan is. I am planning to read, if you go look at her printable list, it does have the novellas on here listed. And so I'm planning to read a novella and a regular novel in a week's period of time. Now, if I look at that and realize that the novella is almost 200 pages, then maybe I won't be able to read them both, and I'll just have to make each one of them their own thing, their own week for it. So we'll see how it goes. But I will try to keep you updated on like the schedule and how that's going. If you want to read along, just know that I'm going to be reading 1 a week started on November 7th. Okay, so my next book, according to my list, is Glory in Death, and I will start that on Sunday. And when I finish, I'll be back here to talk to you about it. I finished book number 2 in the In-Depth series called Glory in Death. And this one I really liked. I guess I'm going to say that for all of them. If I really liked the first 2, surely I'm going to like number 55. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, this book has Eve Dallas again. She's going to be our main character through every one of these stories, I guess. And we are not just getting her point of view, but predominantly it's her point of view. We sometimes get like what other people around her are thinking, and we sometimes get like maybe the killer's point of view occasionally, but predominantly it's Eve. And so this time a prominent lawyer in the city has been murdered, and Eve gets the case. And while she's investigating, someone else dies who might be connected, and somebody else dies who might also be connected. And so anyway, it becomes another potential serial killer issue. However, she starts, I almost said harassing. She starts investigating one direction for someone, and then somebody else comes in and confesses, but clearly didn't do anything because he doesn't know any of the answers. Like, he doesn't even know how the second victim was even killed. And so anyway, clearly a fake confession. And then on top of that, she has her personal life that she thinks is kind of out of control because Rourke is asking her to move in with him. And she's like, no, I don't even do relationships. I don't know what's happening right now. She still has her past that she's completely ignoring at this point. And what I love so much is knowing how many books are in this series. I love that she's given these little bits of information, like she had a horrible childhood, at least until the age of 8, where she kind of turned up and protective services put her into foster care / like a youth home or whatever. And that's kind of where she was raised. And so she doesn't want to remember what happened before she was 8. She gets flashes and she has dreams and she doesn't even want to know. So she has those things that we can work through for the next 50 books. She's got all of the hang-ups that she has about relationships because of all this stuff that happened to her during her childhood. And so they can work through that for the next 50-something books. But I mean, I love her. I love Rourke. I love that Rourke is just steady. Like, I feel like with Eve being so chaotic and so all over the place, especially in her relationship area, that having him be so stable and like there anytime she needs him for what she needs, I like it. I think that it's great that he is written as the type of character that he is. So Now we move on. It's not Sunday right now. I finished reading this on a Tuesday, so I actually have a few days before I'm starting the next book. But the next book is called Immortal in Death, and that one will be starting on Sunday. So when I finish that, I'll be back to update you on that one. Well, I finished my next J.D. Robb book. Really? Airplanes. And it was called Immortal in Death. It came out in July of 1996. Is that right? Yes. Okay. So I know that I continue to say this about these books, but somebody's dogs are being very loud outside. I'm just kidding. It's my dogs. So in this book, Eve is leading up to an event. This book leads up to an event in Eve's personal life. And after this book, everything is going to be a little bit different in her life. And so there's just going to have to be spoilers going forward. So if you haven't read these books, then don't watch this far in, because I don't know how to talk about them that doesn't spoil the previous books. So in this book, though, we meet the guy who is designing Eve's wedding dress. And her best friend is like, oh, I need you to come get your wedding dress done, like all this stuff. And she takes her there to meet this guy. And when she gets there, she realizes that her friend's actually dating him. And she's like, come on, this man is going to overdo it. Like, this is not everything I want to have done. I just want it to be me. And everything in this shop looks like overdone and not like me. And so her friend's like, no, he's a genius, I promise. Well, so it turns out that he is really good. Like, he figures out what Eve needs and what she wants for her dress, and he's doing a really good job. However, he has an ex-girlfriend who ends up being threatened by some people, and she is found killed. This is at the very beginning. And then Eve has to spend the rest of the book finding out who the actual killer is and freeing, or not freeing, but exonerating the people who are suspects, because they're very important people in her life. And so Eve doesn't want them to be arrested, of course. So this was really good because at one time you still had the same kind of issues that Eve always deals with, which is murder in some kind of way. We also had the flashback issue, like I talked about at the beginning, where she's remembering more and more, and she finally remembers like getting away, and she's pretty sure that she killed somebody when she was 8 to get away. And so she wants to turn herself in, like turn in her badge and go report this murder from when she was an 8-year-old. And everybody else around her is like, you do realize that this is not a thing. Like, nobody found a body or reported anybody dead. And we're not taking a confession from an adult of what happened as a child. Like, no, especially because it was self-defense. Like, just nobody is hearing any of this. And so just in the midst of all of that stuff, she's still got her relationship with Rourke that's going on, and planning their wedding. And it was good. I mean, I think I may have liked this one the best so far, and I'm hoping that that's just a pattern that continues, because I only have like 50 something books left to go. So next week will be my 4th J.D. Robb book, and also the last one for this video. And I am ready to keep going, like ready to find out what happens next. They're now at the very end of this one. They were at their wedding, so they're now like married. So now I'm excited to see what happens now that she's married. And I'm wondering if through these next 50 books, are they going to like have kids? Like, do we go that far, or is it like a week? Like, I don't know how much the time spans from book 1 to book 60 or wherever we are in the series. So anyway, that'll be interesting to find out. And I think that is everything for this book. So I will talk to you when I finish the next one. Well, I have finished Rapture in Death, which is the 4th book in the In Depth series. And this might be my favorite so far. I really liked the mystery in this. We had people who were committing suicide, and Eve was like, I don't really think they're doing that themselves. But then she witnesses somebody commit suicide, and we kind of get a wrench thrown in to her ideas. So in this one, we start out with Eve and Rourke on their honeymoon. So at the end of the last book, they got married, and now they're on their honeymoon. And on their honeymoon, someone commits suicide, and it starts this whole thing. They get back from the trip, and someone else has committed suicide. And then, like I said, she's actually at the scene when someone else commits suicide. So she's trying to piece these things together because they're not any way related to each other in any kind of way. And so we're delving more also into just the idea of Eve opening herself up to Rourke and to trusting that love might actually be a thing. And so I have not mentioned this yet, I don't think, but the underlying theme of all of these books is romance. Like, maybe that's not what I mean. Maybe not the underlying theme, but the writer is J.D. Robb, but that's just a pen name for Nora Roberts. And Nora Roberts only writes romance. And so these are mysteries, but they still have some romance in them. So just be aware when you go in. Like the very first book, Eve meets Rourke, and then we see them as they develop their relationship. So surely you're not here watching the synopsis of the fourth book if you're at all interested in reading these. I hope that you've already read them and you're just checking in here to see what I think. So far, I really like these books. I like that we still see all of the surrounding people in her lives. Like she's got, I almost said it's her partner, but it's not. What would her job? She's like an assistant to Eve. That's not true though. Like a junior detective kind of thing that Eve is trying to bring along so that she can eventually become a detective. And I love the two of them together. They are fantastic. And then we've got Eve's best friend and everything that's going on in her life. And she seems to be in a relationship right now. So we'll see where that goes and how that ends up, panning out in the end. Then we've got Rourke's, I'm just going to say butler guy, but whoever is in charge of his house, he does not like Eve, or he really didn't like Eve when she first got there. I think that he does like her, but now he has to give her a hard time just because that's how he started out. But I think that he actually likes her. So we've got all these people that are in their lives, and we see them in each book, just learning little bits about them and how they interact with our main characters and learning more about Eve and Rourke. And so I really am loving this, and I'm glad that this is a series that I chose to do, and I'm going to keep going. So I'll be back in my next Robb a Week video to talk about the next 4 books, possibly 5 if I read one of the novellas that's in there. I think that's going to be short enough that I can talk about it with the other 4 books. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.